your access point to Washington. I'm Aisha Tanzim. The option of all of the U.S. troops leaving Afghanistan after 2014 is now on the table. What does that mean for the future of Afghanistan? Plus, what will be discussed in the big meeting tomorrow when the U.S. president and the Afghan president sit face to face? We'll find out from our guests. We have Ahmed Majid Yar of the American Enterprise Institute right here in the studio with me. And Malu Innocent is joining us via Skype. Malu's with Cato Institute, and both of them are very generous with their time. So I want to thank both of you at the beginning. And let me start with the Facebook comment bit, because when we announced, we didn't announce, but when we announced the zero option, a lot of people were interested and they had a Facebook comment. So let's start with that. Mr. Basharat Hussain said, it will be a good move. I don't think their delay or staying there permanently will end militancy. That's one comment. There are different comments later, but let me start with you, Ahmed. What does it mean?
Well, it was on Tuesday that one of President Obama's advisors mentioned that the zero option is on the table. But we don't know yet whether that was a negotiation ploy by the Obama administration to put pressure on President Karzai, or whether it was a serious option that they are considering. And if they are serious about pulling out all the troops in 2014, I think that it will have very serious implications both for the United States and Afghanistan's future stability. We know that there has been a lot of progress made in Afghanistan. The country's security forces have made a lot of progress in size and quality, but they are not ready to independently defend the country against the Taliban. And if all the troops are pulled out, I think that first of all, we see that in parts of the country, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda can come back and reestablish their safe havens. Secondly, and it's also very much important, and that is that the drones attacks inside Pakistan will also cease, so the United States will not be able to operate special force operations or drones attacks inside Pakistan as well. Thirdly, it will seriously undermine the strengthening and training of the Afghan security forces. And most importantly, I think that it will send a very negative message to the friends and enemies in Afghanistan that the United States and its allies are leaving.
Okay, now there are two things you said, which I want to come back to the second two, which is it a real option or is it a negotiation tactic? We'll come to that. We're coming to you, Malu, but before that, there are two Facebook comments that agree with Ahmed. I want to read them out more. This guy who didn't leave his name, his Facebook name is Sunrise, is saying the U.S. is protecting Afghanistan. Once it leaves Afghanistan, it will become an area of Islamic militants. USA should stay there as long as needed. The other guy, Habibullah Mandukhail, said they should stay in Afghanistan until terrorism ends. Malu, you heard Ahmed. Why is the U.S. leaving? Why is it a good option? And why is it not like the 90s?
Well, I think that when we talk about staying in Afghanistan indefinitely or forever or until the war is won, I don't think that's a realistic assessment in terms of strategy. Strategy is about sort of having a hierarchy of priorities in terms of meeting realistically very scarce resources with achievable objectives. And so in terms of staying in Afghanistan indefinitely or until the war is won, it doesn't really offer a very sort of realistic appraisal of our capabilities in terms of the coalition, but also the ability of the Afghans to stand up on their own. I think there's been a sort of an enormous problem in terms of ensuring that the Afghan elites who do run the ministries and do run the government and do run the central government and the courts, that there be a conditionality on their performance. I think unfortunately those benchmarks have not been made, whether in terms of corruption measures or in terms of meeting effectiveness. You also see a great deal of problems in terms of the patronage networks within the upper echelons of the defense and interior ministries. So I think in terms of if we want to look at a long-term approach for Afghanistan, we need to again sort of meet those interests with the scarce resources we have, and make sure that there are conditions placed on the performance of Afghan elites who will have to shepherd this country through a very tumultuous period.
Okay, Malu, let me just interrupt here.
That the structure of the nation-building project there has largely failed because we have yet to really press the Afghan elites to do more for their people and be as effective as possible.
Yeah,
especially when you have a very hyper-centralized Afghan constitution that also doesn't really help to the structure of Afghanistan. And
I feel like she cannot hear me. So I will come back to you and let them figure out why she cannot hear me. But we have objectives. She mentioned objectives: counterterrorism, disrupt, dismantle al-Qaeda, train Afghans. You said it cannot be done without troops there, but Ben Rhodes said that there are other ways. Actually, not Ben Rhodes. I think Douglas Lute said that it can be done by other means. You can disrupt and dismantle al-Qaeda through drone strikes. You can train Afghans through not necessarily U.S. forces, but other forces.
I wouldn't agree with that. First of all, I think that now we are at a situation that relations between Pakistan and the United States is at its lowest point. So all the drones campaign inside Pakistan is now largely dependent on the U.S. bases in Afghanistan. And there are no alternative bases in the region for the United States to use that. And also, these bases are also important for intelligence gathering, without which the drones attacks cannot be as effective as they are right now. So that's why previously I mentioned that if the United States pull out all troops from Afghanistan, it will lose those bases, those intelligence assets, and also the drones campaign cannot be successful there. And when it comes to Afghanistan again, I agree with Madhu that the Afghan war is not popular in the United States, and both the United States and NATO allies are having a lot of fiscal problems at the moment, which makes it difficult for them to continue large-scale involvement in Afghanistan. But while this is politically expedient for the White House to withdraw all troops, but it has, security-wise, it has very negative implications for both Afghanistan and for the world.
Okay, let me come to you, Malu, again and ask, comment on what Ahmed has just said. And I also have here, you know, the demands that the American administration wants from the Karzai government. And those demands are, if the U.S. troops stay back, they are under the U.S. command and not under Afghan command. They're under the U.S. military law, not the Afghan law. U.S. doesn't want to hand over high-value targets. U.S. doesn't want to give over total control of Bagram. There needs to be some space. If Afghanistan does not agree to those demands, if the U.S. stays there, would it even be safe for the U.S. troops? And, you know, in what conditions can U.S. stay there?
Unfortunately, your question sort of, it was a little choppy. I don't know what's wrong with the sound on my computer, but I think I can answer the question as best I could hear it. You know, beginning last March, there was a beginning of the transition period for the Afghan National Army in terms of transitioning about 20 provinces of the 34 provinces to Afghan control. You know, that's largely been successful in terms of, again, transitioning and handing off lands and provinces to the Afghan forces. I think one problem that we have, and which I had actually addressed earlier, is the issue of when will these forces, when will these brigades, when will these units be able to operate independently of coalition forces. Right now, there's only one brigade in the ANA, in the Afghan National Army, that can operate without American assistance. And even that definition is a bit murky because when you read through the Pentagon reports, you know, the independent with advisors counts as sort of being independent, even though they have advisors. So it's very difficult. I think, again, just getting back to my previous point, which is not necessarily so much about the U.S. economic conditions presenting pressures on the war. I think the issue is, will these sort of expenditures bear fruit if the Afghan elites themselves are either unwilling or unable to take the reins of power in an effective way? I think, again, when we get to the issue of the vast and powerful patronage networks within the upper echelons of the defense and interior ministries, when we talk about sort of the factionalism and fragmentation and internal rivalries within the ANA, I think those present very serious problems independent of the assistance that the United States is providing. I think we need to understand that if we sort of go on with business as usual, let's say tomorrow President Obama says we're going to leave all the troops there, we're going to leave 66,000 troops in Afghanistan to support the Afghan people. Fine, but again, what are the metrics, what are the benchmarks, what are the conditionalities that are placed on Afghan performance? And if those performance metrics aren't there, it doesn't matter if we're there for 2 weeks or if we're there for 10 years.
Ahmed.
Yeah, two comments. First of all, about the issues of contention between President Karzai and President Obama. I think that there will be three issues. First of all, the issue of immunity that you raised is a very sensitive one, because that was the one which derailed similar negotiations with Iraq in December 2001. and led to the pullout of all
as
US
U.S.
troops.
administration has pointed out, Iraq hasn't necessarily fallen into the kind of chaos that people predicted.
Yeah, but Afghanistan is different. And also, I think that the Kabul government will be more flexible in terms of negotiation state of force agreement with the United States than Iraq was, because Afghanistan is a much poorer country. Iraq had all this oil, and Afghanistan's economy remains largely dependent on the foreign aid. And also Afghanistan's security forces needs funding and training.
Which is all true, but Malu also has a point, which is if the Afghan forces have not so far performed up to par, what tells us they might do it in future? The U.S. cannot be there forever.
The Afghan security forces have made remarkable progress over the past 3 years. It's incorrect to say that this training of the Afghan security forces has been a 11 years or 10 years project. It has not. The real training and equipping of the Afghan security forces started in November 2009 when President Obama refocused the United States attention in Afghanistan. And so far we see that, as Malu said, that 20 provinces out of 34 provinces have been transitioned, and we see success there. The Afghan security forces are leading about 80% of all the operations there. But yeah, she is right that the Afghan security forces still remain reliant on the coalition forces in terms of enablers. For example, air power, logistics, surveillance, intelligence, and decision-making. So those are the areas that the coalition forces in the next years have to work with the Afghan security forces so they become independent, so they can carry out the job when all of the forces are gone.
So I want to move to the next phase, but Malu, you were shaking your head, so I want to ask you, do you want to just briefly comment on this, and then we can move on to the next question?
Oh, I think Ahmed is right. I think that, we didn't really start training the Afghans until 2009. And that was, again, just a huge blunder of the coalition forces. I mean, if we're going to stand down as the Afghans stand up, they would plausibly need an army. They would need some sort of military. They would need a police force. And that was very much overlooked. There are many reasons why that was the case. People have different theories, partly because of certainly the Iraq War and the shift of resources. But it's certainly correct to say that we didn't really start the training of the Afghan National Security Forces until 2009, very, very late in the game. And to think that we can sort of build an army out of scratch in a matter of years is I also think is very much wishful thinking. I think, if we look forward past 2014, getting to what Ahmed was saying about the fears of an implosion, of a collapse of the Afghan government, I think it's partly because of the underdevelopment of the country. We've seen, over the last 10 years, tremendous progress, certainly in terms of access to education, primary education, healthcare services, expanded rights for people, certainly. And I think one area that we really haven't seen a great deal of progress is something that's sort of sustainable in terms of long-term investment, economic development within the country. The World Bank has been warning for the past year or so that there's a fear that after 2014, Afghanistan will collapse because the government remains so heavily dependent on foreign assistance. I think that's certainly a very plausible fear to have when we look beyond 2014. But again, we must come to this question of if we stay till 2024, will there be a sustainable economy that can, again, fund the Afghan government, that can fund the Afghan security forces, that can fund the Afghan police, and can really expand the writ of the government beyond Kabul and beyond Mazar-e Sharif and beyond the cities into the more rural areas where the Taliban have sway. Afghans aren't aliens from out of space. They look for alternatives. And if there's not an Afghan court in their area, or if there's an Afghan court that is extremely corrupt, they will turn to the Taliban alternative. That's not something that I would like, but that is just sort of the reality of certain areas when you're dealing with a country and a government that's so underdeveloped.
Okay, so let me go to the next Facebook comment, which kind of brings me to the next question. It kind of fits very well. And Mr. Mushtaq Hajin said, I think America will not fulfill its promise of leaving Afghanistan. So, Ahmed, is it, as you suggested in the beginning, maybe not a real option, but a negotiation tactic to get what President Obama wants from President Karzai tomorrow when they meet?
I think that people in the region, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, they have legitimate concerns about a premature disengagement of the United States, and that's because of the history. We saw after the Soviet withdrawal in 1989 that the United States just completely disengaged itself from the region. It cut aid to Pakistan. Instead, it imposed sanctions on the country and played no part in the building of a government after the Kabul regime collapsed. And we saw the result of that. That was a Pakistan that we now see is on the verge of collapse. There is increasing radicalization, terrorism. And we saw also an Afghanistan which became a hotbed for global terrorism. So that's why it's important for the United States not to make the same mistakes again and ensure that this transition process which are happening be gradual, conditions-based, and orderly, so that the gains of the past decade will not be lost.
So you think that President Obama, when he sits down with President Karzai, is only using it as a negotiation tactic?
I don't think that the Obama administration will completely disengage from Afghanistan at this point. We know that unlike the Iraq war, which was the Bush war, Afghanistan is still seen as President Obama's war, and that will have an impact on his legacy. And that's why also that last year, President Obama and President Karzai, they signed a memorandum of understanding for long-term relationship between the two countries. And although the agreement just laid out the broader principles of cooperation between the two countries, right now they are working on a bilateral agreement which will lay out specifics of that long-term partnership. So I don't think that Washington will abandon Afghanistan completely this time.
Okay. Well, Malu, what I want to ask you is that several people who cover the area, Afghanistan, Pakistan, South Asia, have said that it may be a negotiation tactic. It may not be a real option, but even the hint of a zero option is sending a message in the region that America is going to do what it did in the 90s, A, and B, it's sending a message of fear in Afghanistan that Taliban are returning. America is leaving, and the Afghan security forces cannot stand up to the Taliban onslaught.
Yeah, I think that, this idea of keeping forces in Afghanistan, whether it's 20,000 or 5,000 or 2,000 or 50,000, I think it's going to be largely symbolic in terms of what Ahmed mentioned earlier about the long-term strategic partnership agreement. There is certainly a long-term commitment that America has made to Afghanistan's long-term stability and security, at least through 2024. So I'd agree. I don't think that a zero option is really on the table. I think it was sort of a trial balloon, if you will, sort of testing the waters, and of course as well to also put pressure onto Karzai and the ruling elites. I think in terms of what the message this sends to the Taliban, I'm not sure how much it's going to be different than what the message is being sent now. There's sort of a bizarre catch-22 in America's performance and role in Afghanistan. If it leaves, it's considered weak. It's going to embolden jihadists. It's going to embolden extremists. It's going to make the entire operation and mission look as if it was all futile. But at the same time, if America stays, then America is an occupying force. It's occupying the country with drones and with night raids that have certainly agitated the Afghan people. We can look back at the controversies with the urination on the Taliban corpses by the American troops, the accidental burning of Qurans. I mean, there are certain things where I think either way there's a catch-22, and either if America stays or if it leaves, certainly there'll be problems in terms of emboldening the Taliban's message. In that case, then the United States must do what's in its vital interests. And at least from the vantage point of many Americans and many analysts within the region, certainly too, I think the United States can have not only a zero presence, but even a limited presence and still fulfill its sort of vital interests. And again, just not to belabor this point, but we must also keep in mind that even though Afghanistan was, harboring the al-Qaeda elements that were responsible for 9/11, 9/11 was also planned in Malaysia and in Los Angeles and in Hamburg, Germany. So it's not, I think it misses the point when we sort of preoccupy ourselves with Afghanistan. I mean, this is, again, a global network, and it was able to go through LAX. It was able to go through San Diego, and I think we need to sort of keep that perspective in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Can
and
I
you
make a quick comment about
comment.
the messaging?
Yes.
Because I think that the Obama administration over the past 4 years, they've had a lot of the right policies in Afghanistan, but the reason that the mission did not succeed there has a lot to do with the messaging problem. Because we saw that President Obama announced the surge of 33,000 troops, but at the same time, it announced withdrawal of that just the next year. So if you're a tribal leader or tribesman in Afghanistan and having suffered 34 years of constant war and survival is priority for you, you will not side with the United States and with the Afghan government if you know that you will be left at the mercy of the Taliban next day.
The same was said about Pakistan, that they were hedging the bets because they weren't sure U.S.
Absolutely. And similarly, right now, just even talking about the zero option sends a very negative message, as I mentioned, to not just the enemies, but also to the friends. I think that the Taliban will not have any incentive to enter into a meaningful negotiation if they know that U.S. troops are just leaving and militarily they can become victorious. And secondly, also to the friends there. There are a lot of warlords, strong men who are now part of the Afghan government and play a relatively positive role in the country. They will take things on their own hand if they know that the U.S. troops are leaving. And we already see signs of some of these local strong men rearming their local militias in preparation for a civil war or just fearing a Taliban return.
Because they can't just rely on the Afghan army. It's not ready yet.
Yes, absolutely. And one commander, Ismail Khan, who is now cabinet minister in Kabul, he even said that that the government should rearm the Mujahideen of the past time because the Afghan security forces are not ready and the Taliban might come and the coalition forces are leaving. So we have to be very much careful about these messaging from Washington.
So we can keep talking about that, but there's another important big development, which is the two presidents are meeting tomorrow. So let's go to that, but we also have some Facebook comments about this issue. Let's get them before we move on to the next issue. We have a Facebook comment from Mr. Fazil Shah, who says, I think the Obama administration took the decision to withdraw their troops from Afghanistan at the end of 2014 due to its own financial crisis. But again, the main question here is about the capability of Afghan troops. Controlling their country will be a big challenge for them. And Mr. Shahnawaz Ahmed said, I think it's important that the NATO army leave Afghanistan, but the Afghan security forces are not in a condition to handle Taliban. The result could be worse. A compromise is needed between Afghanistan and Taliban. I think we've discussed in depth how the Afghan forces are not ready, but Ahmed, I want to come to you and ask you what will be on the table tomorrow when the two presidents sit down face to face?
I think that the two leaders will talk about a wide range of issues, primarily on the reconciliation with the Taliban and also Afghanistan's presidential elections, which is scheduled for April 2014.
Will there be pressure on President Karzai not to run again? He cannot run again, but not to interfere too much?
I think that the pressure will be to hold a transparent and free election. President Karzai has already mentioned that he will not run for the election, and he's not allowed by the Constitution to run for another term anyway. But at the top of the meeting agenda will be the post-war presence of the United States in Afghanistan. That what the size, the scope, and the obligations of those security forces will be, and that will be what will dominate tomorrow's meeting between the two leaders.
And that is what some are saying is the reason for this leak, quote unquote, of zero option, because the size, the scope, and the law under which the U.S. forces stay in Afghanistan will be very important. Malu, I want to come to you. What will be on the table tomorrow, and what part of it do you think is the most crucial to U.S. staying or leaving?
I suspect that the Obama administration, President Obama in particular, will convey America's long-term commitment to Afghanistan and the Afghan people. I think, you know, the sort of zero option, again, as we mentioned earlier, was sort of a trial balloon, a tactic in negotiations. But from what we see from policy, what we see in terms of the long-term strategic partnership agreement, what we saw at the Tokyo conference over this last summer, there's been a strong international commitment to remain in Afghanistan as best as possible. And this sort of gets to the issue, what Ahmed had mentioned earlier about messaging. I think it's very difficult for a democracy to remain in a country for 11 years or more when a majority of its population at home is adamantly opposed to continuing that conflict. I think this is partly the reason why we've seen this sort of conflicting messages and many Afghans who are unwilling to stick their necks out on the line. That sort of almost reinforces my point in the sense that it's very difficult to nation build abroad, especially for a democracy. And I don't think that the president can really have the political cover necessary to have just an overarching commitment of 66,000 troops when many in Congress are now sort of they want to pull funding out from the Afghan war, when many Americans, 60% according to the latest Pew poll, want to pull out of Afghanistan. So I think the Obama administration is sort of navigating a very difficult balance. I think on the one hand, it wants to appease its domestic audience that does want to pull out. But at the same time, they understand that there are very real threats within the region, maybe not all directed at the United States, some of them directed at the Afghan government or the Pakistani government, but they want to convey symbolically a long-term commitment to the country. And so I think you're going to see a bit of ambivalence and a little bit of that difference tomorrow. But I think what's really important right now in terms of messaging and sort of the commitment is to understand that the Obama administration really focused on Afghanistan wholeheartedly right when it came into office in 2009. I think then was the time, and hopefully we can do so again now this year, but I think then was the time to push forward on a political settlement with the Taliban and with everyone at the negotiating table, including Pakistan. I think that was a missed opportunity, unfortunately. We should have really pushed hard on the senior Taliban leadership and done something. But lately we've seen the collapse of the negotiations in Qatar. Now there's sort of this peace plan roadmap for 2015 that's going to be Pakistan-led. Hopefully that'll bear fruit. But I think right now we need to focus on sort of the peace aspect, which certainly is going to be very difficult. And I'm the first one to argue that. But that is something that really would be something to sort of move in a positive direction rather than just simply focus on military aspects of the operation.
Emma, you mentioned messaging, you mentioned some of the things that will be mentioned in the meeting. What will be President Karzai's agenda for this meeting? What does he want to walk out with?
The President Karzai's request from the United States primarily is to strengthen and equip the Afghan security forces, especially the Afghan Air Force, which is hardly functional at the moment. That's why the Afghan forces remain reliant on the coalition when it comes to air power. So he has reportedly come with a very expensive shopping list of military hardware and equipment, such as fighter jets, tanks, and even drones. But I don't think that he will get all of that here, because Pentagon officials have previously mentioned that Afghanistan cannot afford, operate, or sustain these military hard power. But
not to mention the fiscal cliff that's coming up in the U.S., which is probably going to be holding back.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is one thing else that many officials here in the United States says that the U.S. should be there only for its own interest and leave there only a very small footprint, which will focus on counterterrorism, not to just do nation building in Afghanistan. But it's also important to know that if the United States refuses to help the Afghan government and strengthen its institutions, first of all, the long will continue forever, and B,
so I'll interrupt
also the Afghan government will not allow the United States counterterrorism operation to continue there.
So we get it that the Afghan government needs help and support, but here's the thing. Afghan government is alleged that there's lots of corruption there. A lot of people are saying that a lot of coalition support fund money going into Afghanistan is not going into the right hands or the right uses. Then in this situation, how will Mr. Karzai convince Americans?
Part of the problems that are in Afghanistan, of course, the government of President Karzai has not been serious about tackling corruption. And as Malu mentioned previously, that still corruption is very much prevalent and remains a very serious threat to the future of Afghanistan. But we also have to accept that the international community has been part of that problem there. They have not done enough to on their own part to build the Afghan institutions, so just as part of the corruption campaign. That needs to change. One demand of the Afghan president at this meeting is that most of the aid money should be channeled through the government. And I think that the international community accepts that if the Afghan government becomes serious about tackling corruption. And we also know that all the international aid, whether it was at the Paris conference or whether some pledge that will be made tomorrow, that will be dependent on the performance of the Afghan government in the next years in terms of corruption.
And I know from a South Asian perspective, all money going through the government is not always the best idea in terms of corruption. Sometimes it leads to more government corruption, not less. So, I mean, that demand in itself kind of says government wants to hold on to that money.
I didn't want to just mention that. I wasn't suggesting that all the money should go to the government. But what the international community, primarily the United States, should do, as Malu mentioned before, that focus focus on the strengthening of the Afghan institutions, on the Afghan government, and also non-government institutions, so that there will be more transparency and efficiency in future.
Okay, so NGOs can get some of the money. And America, although it is there till 2014, the European nations are also going to bear some of the burden. We are going to come back to this issue, of course. This issue is not going anywhere, but our time today has ended. I want to thank my guest, Malu Innocent, who was with us via Skype from Cato Institute, and Ahmed Majidyar, who was right here in the studio with us. Ahmed is with the American Enterprise Institute. You were watching Access Point with Aisha Tanzim. Leave us your comments. Tell us what you thought about the show, suggestions for next week's show, or anything else that you want to hear from us. Hope to see you there. Goodbye.